What do you make of Elon so far?
Well, look, I certainly do have some concerns about the conflicts of interest that Elon Musk obviously has. I mean, he's a very successful businessman. He has multiple successful businesses. And look, I get it. He's already super wealthy, and people think, oh, he's not going to abuse the power that's been given to him by Trump because he doesn't need any more money. That doesn't matter. I mean, look, the most important thing, the most valuable thing that tech CEOs want is data. Data is power. Data fuels their businesses. And so the idea that someone like Elon Musk, who is in the tech industry, having all this access to our private personal information makes me incredibly uneasy. I also, by the way, agree that there is waste in our federal.
Ana Kasparian wants people to believe that Elon Musk is some kind of threat to democracy. But the real threat is the bloated, unaccountable bureaucracy that protects its own interest at the expense of the American people. Instead of worrying about Musk's influence, maybe Ana Kasparian should be asking why our government is storing retirement paperwork in an actual underground mine like it's still 1955.
Government. There is bureaucracy that needs to be cut down in our federal government. And if you go back to the Clinton administration, I mean, he got rid of hundreds of thousands of federal workers. And I think that that did bode well for our economy. I mean, that was the last time we had an economic surplus in the United States. Now, of course, he implemented higher taxes for the top marginal tax rate and stuff like that. But when it came to getting rid of the bureaucracy under the Clinton administration, there was more of a review process. And it wasn't this, blind cutting of entire, departments or agencies. And so I wish there was more method to it, more of a review to ensure that we're actually getting rid of individuals that we don't really necessarily need in our government. I don't like the fact that he has Elon Musk didn't do this, but Russell Vought, who's now the head of the Office of Management and Budget and the deputy head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, has effectively halted all operations at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I do not agree with that at all. That's literally the only federal government agency that's doing oversight of how the big banks are treating American citizens. They've returned $21 billion to Americans who have been defrauded by financial institutions. So that's where I have the biggest disagreement right now. But
Ana Kasparian is desperate to defend the CFPB, but she conveniently ignores how it became another leftist slush fund, funneling money to activist groups pushing radical policies. While she praises its so-called consumer protections, Ana Kasparian refuses to acknowledge the corruption, overreach, and political targeting that made this agency a weapon of the establishment.
In regard to, doing an overview of what's happening with USAID, I have no problem with that. I think that there were good programs mixed in with a lot of waste and a lot of bad programs. And hopefully we can bring those good programs back. Because, building alliances and relationships through soft power, especially in African countries, which China is competing with us in, basically having influence on, I think that's something we need to be considerate of. I mean, the Chinese want to have access to minerals, natural resources, all sorts of things that the United States wants in Africa. And so when we cut down on programs that specifically help, individuals who are suffering from AIDS, HIV, things like that, malaria, well, we're basically destroying a relationship that's not just beneficial to the individuals we're helping in these countries, but also beneficial for the United States and our own economic interests.
So I think that's a fair point. And I actually think that there's not really a desire by Trump or anybody else to cut the funding we were doing for women and their babies who are born with HIV. I actually think that just got swept up because the whole program was such a mess and had been so corrupted. It was no, we're stopping it. And I think that will probably come back. Not only because it's the right thing to do, but because we do worry about China stepping in and becoming the big brother and getting more closely aligned with these countries that right now are grateful to the United States for all the help that we give to them. It's just that it got so corrupted by all these other weird far left DEI things that they were let's just no, it's stopping right now, and then we can start again. And I think that will start again. But let's talk about this Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which I think most people don't even really know anything about, to be honest with you. But it was started it's kind of an Elizabeth Warren project. It was started after the big bank meltdown in '08 to try to make sure something like that doesn't happen again, where there's this collusion within the financial industry on mortgages or something related that winds up really screwing over the consumers in many instances, first with the mortgages and the collapse, and then with us having to bail out the banks. The hope is that they'd protect something like that from happening, prevent it from happening again. But here, so on Friday, Elon Musk posted on his X page saying, CFPB, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, RIP, with the tombstone emoji. Mm-hmm. The CFPB's X account has since been deleted. And Trump also announced that they are closing the offices of the CFPB for the coming week. And Russell Vogt, director of OMB, said that he ordered the staff there to cease all supervision and examination activity and cease all stakeholder engagement, and said he would not take the next drawdown of funding from the Federal Reserve for this group. So they say that this is why they did it. The White House put out a statement saying this is another one of those agencies that's just lost its way, right? Like it's not doing just the main thing that I think you and I both are happy for them to do. They say this: CFPB used its slush fund collected from targeting these financial institutions to support radical advocacy groups. One such group is the Soros-backed Mississippi Center for Justice, which advocates for racial and economic justice, targets religious liberty, assists illegal immigrants seeking to skirt our nation's law. Another is the Legal Aid Society of D.C., whose board features senior left-wing officials, has lobbied hundreds of thousands of times for more welfare spending. That the group threatened banks for refusing to lend to illegal immigrants. They targeted Chicago small business after it complained about the city's rampant crime. It was accused of mining Americans' citizens' personal financial information, with a 2017 Inspector General report raising significant concerns about data security, et cetera, et cetera. They're saying the same thing happened here as happened to USAID, which is why they're doing those things that I listed at the top.
Yeah, so let me just preface this by saying I don't take anything that the left says at face value. I also don't take anything the right says at face value. So there have been instances where the right has claimed something, the left says, no, that's not happening. I look into it and it turns out the right is actually correct. In fact, USAID is a perfect example. There were incredibly wasteful programs within USAID, as Democrats pretend like there were no wasteful programs. And so the CFPB is something that I have been kind of passionate about throughout my career. I was supportive of it being developed. It was Elizabeth Warren's project before she was even a senator. She wasn't in the Senate at the time. And she really had to push Barack Obama, who was insanely friendly to the banks, to actually do something on behalf of the American people who had been defrauded and who had been preyed upon by the big banks in the lead up to the 2008 economic collapse. So all the claims that you listed, I have looked into, and they are unfounded. Okay, so how the CFPB operates is they receive money from the Federal Reserve, not from taxpayers. So the Federal Reserve allocates about $700 million so they can carry out investigations of wrongdoing by, payday lenders, big banks, you get the picture, or other financial institutions. Through that money, which is honestly a small sum, they have been able to return $21 billion to Americans who had been defrauded or screwed over or ripped off by the banks. Other things that they've done is they have basically made it so your medical debt cannot be used on your credit report to prevent you from being able to rent a home, an apartment. They've ensured that overdraft fees are not predatory and they're capped at $8 as opposed to $35.
I saw that. That's good.
So they've done some really, really good things on behalf of the American people. Look, I am disgusted with our federal government. Okay. All these federal agencies have not carried out what their intended duties have been. I think that they have kind of lost their way in some cases. And I do agree that there's a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of waste. The CFPB is not an example of that. And I'm really saddened to see that there's a real effort here to essentially dismantle it. And I was listening to
why do you think
Federal
they're doing
Reserve
that?
Chair.
If you don't, and I
I'll tell you
have
why.
not looked beyond the White House's assertions that these are problems and that's what they're trying. So I'll take your word for now that you've looked into it and you don't believe they're viable, that they're true. But why do you, if that's true, then why are they doing this?
So I'll tell you why. I'm most concerned about the influence that the tech industry and tech CEOs have on the Trump administration. So people like Mark Andreessen, for instance, he went on Joe Rogan's podcast and he claimed that the CFPB is debanking people when it's actually the opposite. The CFPB goes after banks that debank individuals over their political leanings or political views. They actually have gone out of their way to try to protect Americans who have been debanked. The CFPB, though, does go after individuals who are engaging in things like money laundering, right? Who are maybe part of the fintech industry and are using that sector to carry out nefarious actions. And so they don't want a cop on the block. And these are people who have been cozying up to Trump. And that is really concerning because I think Trump has some good ideas, but he's also very transactional. And so if these individuals have donated a significant sum of money to his campaign, well, he's going to return the favor in some way. And so that's what I'm most worried about. If American people notice that there's no cop watching what Wall Street's up to, that might end up ricocheting onto Donald Trump, and it might actually hurt him politically. So we'll see what happens. But CFPB was, again, one of the only federal government agencies that was looking out for the best interests of Americans who were getting ripped off by big banks.
It's very interesting. That's a good alternate side of it. What did you make of Elon at the White House yesterday? Because he was up there sort of serially going through some of the things that have been said about him and then some of the things that he says he's finding. And one of the most interesting things was he was talking about how it's so hard to fire people, about how there's a maximum of 10,000 people who can be fired from the federal government in a month because they have to go through some just antiquated exchange of forms that goes down literally into a mine, like an actual mine. Well, I'll let him explain it. Stand by. It's SOT 3.
If people can retire, with full benefits and everything, that would be good. They can retire, get their retirement payments, everything. And then we were told, this is actually, I think, a great anecdote, because we were told the most number of people that could retire possibly in a month is 10,000. We're like, well, why is that? Well, because all the retirement paperwork is manual on paper. It's manually calculated, then written down on a piece of paper. Then it goes down a mine. And like, what do you mean a mine? Like, yeah, there's a limestone mine where we store all the retirement paperwork. And you look at a picture of this mine. We'll post some pictures afterwards. And this mine looks like something out of the 50s because it was started in 1955. So it looks like it's like a time warp. And then the speed, the limiting factor is the speed at which the mine shaft elevator can move determines how many people can retire from the federal government. And the elevator breaks down sometimes, and then nobody can retire. Doesn't that sound crazy?
I think that's very effective, right? It sounds crazy. And I think the average person staying at home is like drinking this in, right? Like, wow, here are pictures of the mine. This is so weird. Why are we doing this in such an antiquated way? This is not a good use of our taxpayer dollars.
Wow. Yeah, look, I haven't looked into his claims, so I don't know for sure if the way he described it is entirely accurate. I think there are two things happening here, right? So there is the message, right? And so I think a lot of what he says needs to be fact checked, and I haven't been able to do that yet.
By the way, there are a lot of fact checks by the left of Elon today saying it's true.
Interesting. Okay, so that's fascinating. But I want to just talk about the optics and the politics of what happened last night, because I know that Democrats are being super critical because at the end of the day, Elon Musk is a billionaire. He's got conflicts of interest. And so it's rich to hear someone like Elon Musk tell us, just trust me, we're doing everything right. It's all above board. At the same time, though, when you compare what appears to be quite a bit of transparency in this new Trump administration versus the lack of transparency we received during the Biden administration, well, I mean, optically speaking, I think most Americans are going to have this sense that, Trump is telling the truth. He wants to be honest with us. He's calling it like it is. He's constantly in the media, constantly doing press conferences. And so I think that is an important thing for the Democratic Party to maybe soak in and realize, if you're going to try to hide from your voters, if you're going to try to hide the ball from your base, it's not going to bode well for you. The optics of transparency is important. Actually being transparent is more important. And so it really remains to be seen if Elon Musk was telling the truth about everything he said during that Oval Office press conference. But again, I just want to reiterate, I don't feel comfortable with someone who's still very much invested in these private businesses, seeming to call the shots when no one elected him. I also didn't like the optics of Donald Trump kind of like quietly sitting at a desk with Elon Musk kind of hovering above him and kind of commanding the room. I feel like that looked a little bad, but I'm curious.
But only because Trump let him command the room. I mean, it was no different from when I appeared at the Trump rally in Pittsburgh and Trump stepped away from the microphone and then said, "Go ahead, Megan." And he was standing off to the side. It didn't make me look like the president. It's like I had the mic because he gave it to me, and I would lose the mic if he said, "Stop talking." Same as Elon. I will say this. This is Washington Examiner and Washington Post this morning. Washington Examiner, the mine complex is owned by Iron Mountain, which leases out caverns for storage. And we were using Manhattan mini storage all those years in New York. The government moved its old records there in 1960. The mine, which holds employees in the government's Office of Personnel Management, has been trying to revolutionize its process for decades without success. The government's been trying to automate the mine's work since at least 1981. At least $100 million has been spent on the effort to automate the work there, and it's not happening. Washington Post reported from inside the mine in 2014, the 5-step process for a worker's retirement papers just to be fully processed, like just to get them and process them. First step, a worker files the retirement paper and the paperwork is shipped to the facility. Once it arrives, a worker must match it up to other paper records or scan them into a digital database. All the paperwork must be placed into a file. Missing paperwork must be acquired from other federal agencies. That paperwork is then turned into a digital file, reviewed separately by another employee. It took at least 61 days on average then, the same amount of time it took in 1977, when I am going to guess you were not even born. This is so sad. I mean, I think people get it's just right that the government sucks. And this is part of why Trump got elected, right? It's like you don't expect him to do it perfectly. You don't expect it to be all T's dotted or all I's dotted and T's crossed. But you want the bull going into this China shop and saying, why the F are we using a mine that we were using in 1977?
Yeah. And look, we all know what we pay in taxes every year. And it is incredibly frustrating to see where the money actually gets spent, how little of it goes toward modernizing our systems, and essentially how little of it goes to making the lives of American citizens better. There is a lot of waste. I mean, look, one of the main things that drives me crazy is how year after year, with little debate, the Congress approves more and more money for the Pentagon. I mean, the defense budget is very rapidly approaching $1 trillion a year. And so there has been some talk about focusing on some waste. I mean, the Pentagon has failed every single audit 7 years in a row. And so I'm excited to see what DOJ focuses on in regard to the Pentagon. The other issue is the fact
has welcomed them to come in. Hegseth wants that too.
So we'll see what they cut and see how much of a difference it makes. The other area where I think that Trump can really make a difference, and I think he would go down as a historic president, is if he allowed for our Medicare system to negotiate drug prices. Just negotiate drug prices.
He's not going to do anything, right? He's not going to touch Medicare or security with reform or anything because he's a smart politician. They all know if they say anything about Medicare or Social Security, they're not going to win. So all of the efforts have been outside of those two groups, which of course are the main groups behind entitlement spending. And I mean, that would really show. You want to see like Trump proving he has a steely spine and he doesn't give a shit? Go do something about that over there, which it's not going to happen.
But he would go down as the most popular president in American history if he allowed for Medicare to negotiate drug prices. So Americans and our Medicare system wasn't being price gouged by pharmaceutical companies.
Why won't he do that? I mean, I know why he won't lower the retirement age for Social Security and he doesn't want to make any Medicare cuts or do anything that's going to increase costs for seniors. But why wouldn't he allow Medicare to negotiate costs?
Honestly, I think if this issue was brought to him by by anyone in a very serious way, he would attempt to do it. He doesn't really care about
maybe Dr.
what
Oz
is or isn't allowed, right? So yeah, I mean, that would be incredible. I don't think that he's paying attention to that, but I think if you talk to him and ask him to work on that issue, it could really save the American taxpayers
RFKJ will do
a lot of money. That would
what
be
about
fantastic.
that, Anna?
I mean,
this isn't something I spent a lot of time on, but like this sounds like something that wouldn't typically be done because most people are beholden to the drug companies who don't want this. And RFKJ is not beholden to the drug companies. That's one of the great things about him. That's one of the things the left hates about him. But he, you know, technically oversees Medicare now. And well, when he gets confirmed, which is going to be tomorrow. And Dr. Oz directly oversees Medicare and Medicaid. And so like maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they actually will touch the untouchable.
Oh, it would embarrass Democrats so much if they managed to do that. It would be the most embarrassing thing for Democrats who claimed under the Biden administration that they were going to do it, but they're beholden to the pharmaceutical companies as well.
Yep.
And so they whittled down that part of the agenda to 10 drugs that the Medicare system can negotiate. I mean, it's pathetic. It really is.